A 70-mile-wide asteroid named Matilda is heading toward Earth, and if it truly strikes, our entire planet will be destroyed. The government quickly sent a spacecraft to try and destroy it, but unfortunately, the spacecraft exploded as soon as it entered the asteroid's field. This means humanity has no hope left. In 3 weeks, the asteroid will hit Earth, and all life as we know it will end. Dodge and Linda, a married couple, were listening to this news through their car radio. However, Dodge seemed completely unaffected. He just mentioned that they might miss the way out of all of this. Linda, who was starting to feel stressed by his attitude, eventually decided to leave him. After that, people all around the world began planning the end of their lives. They checked their bucket lists, trying to fulfill what they hadn't done yet. Friends on the streets offered various services like brief encounters, helping find someone to spend time with at the end of the world. Even mercenaries offered to eliminate those who felt too weak to survive. However, Dodge, who felt like he had nothing left in life, just carried on with his boring daily routine. With only 21 days left, Dodge still went to the gym, even though it was almost empty. On TV, Dodge watched the news report that all mobile phone services would be shut down and water and electricity would follow soon. Dodge continued his commute to work, stuck in heavy traffic as many people tried to leave the city, searching for a safe or enjoyable place for their remaining time. At the office, only a few people showed up, and Dodge kept receiving calls from clients asking if there was insurance for this global disaster. He also attended meetings where it was announced that there was a promotion for anyone still coming to the office, given how many people were no longer showing up. However, none of them took up the offer. When Dodge got home, he checked the mailbox, and as usual, it was empty. He also saw his neighbor, Penny, running out of her apartment after arguing with her boyfriend, Owen, who seemed to be yelling at her. Dodge then entered his apartment and met Elsa, his weekly cleaner. Dodge tried to tell her that she didn't need to come anymore, given the state of the world, but Elsa thought she hadn't been fired, so she went ahead and took care of her work as usual. Before leaving, Elsa said goodbye with a promise to return next week. After that, Dodge sat down, drank some cough syrup, and watched TV, knowing that the last flights had been canceled and airlines were no longer operating. Only those with private planes could fly, although experts advised against it due to the high risks. That night, as Dodge was about to go to sleep, he saw a spider in the bathroom and briefly considered killing it. However, in the end, Dodge decided to let it live. Turns out, that night, the spider crawled across his face. The next morning, Dodge went to work with a few spider bites on his face. When he arrived at the office, Dodge was shocked to find the body of a coworker who had just ended their life, landing on his car. A week passed, and only 14 days were left. Dodge attended an end-of-the-world party hosted by his friend Diane. There, Dodge met Diane's teenage kids, who had previously mocked their parents, but now they were just insulting each other without a care. Diane's husband finally pulled out his rare cigarettes and offered to share with Dodge, while Diane commented that she wasn't surprised Linda left him, since Dodge always seemed unhappy with his wife. This shocked Dodge, as honestly, he had never noticed it. Diane also tried to set Dodge up with someone because Dodge didn't want to die alone, but when Dodge declined, her husband said that Dodge wouldn't die alone because the whole world was heading toward death together, and Diane introduced Dodge to Karen, a woman wearing all the fancy stuff she rarely used. Dodge tried to talk to her, but the atmosphere felt super awkward, and Dodge didn't know what to say. During dinner, people started sharing their plans for the remaining time, like visiting family or checking off things from their bucket list. Karen said she wanted to spend time with someone special while giving Dodge a flirty smile. After dinner, the party got wilder. People even let the kids join in and have a drink. Karen kept dancing while still flirting with Dodge, who was doing his best to ignore her. One of his friends told Dodge that now, with the world ending, women didn't have standards and every guy had a chance, no matter how ugly they were. His friend even mentioned that he'd been with a lot of women last week and invited Dodge to help him flirt with Karen, but Dodge turned him down. Not long after, fireworks and drugs started circulating, and Dodge couldn't take it anymore. He immediately went to find a quiet place and hid in the bathroom. When Diane came to check on him, Dodge was shocked because Diane tried to get closer to him. Dodge quickly rejected her and reminded her that she was married. Diane just explained that no one cared about that anymore. Dodge finally decided to leave the party early and started thinking about his life. As he looked at a picture of his high school girlfriend, Olivia, Dodge began to play the harmonica, but stopped when he heard a woman crying from the fire escape. Dodge decided to check it out and found Penny crying loudly. Penny had just missed the last flight to England, and now she wouldn't be able to be with her family at the end of time. Dodge felt bad for her and invited her in. They sat together and drank some cough syrup mixed with vodka. In return, Penny offered him some weed, but Dodge turned it down. Penny explained that smoking was the only way she could sleep and wake up because she had hypersomnia, meaning she could sleep through anything, even if the world was ending. They watched TV together and eventually fell asleep on the couch. The next morning, Penny was still sound asleep, even though the TV was on loud and Elsa was vacuuming right next to her. Dodge tried pinching her nose, but there was no reaction, so he played the harmonica. The sound of the harmonica finally woke Penny up, and she said she was ready to go back to her apartment now. Penny took Dodge downstairs and gave him a stack of letters that had been mistakenly delivered to her mailbox. Over the years, Penny had kept those letters, but never had the chance to give them to Dodge. Penny also mentioned that the only person she knew from Dodge was Linda, who Penny thought was his roommate because she always saw Linda happy with her boyfriend. Penny took Dodge downstairs and gave him a stack of letters that had been mistakenly delivered to her mailbox. Over the years, Penny had kept those letters but never had the chance to give them to Dodge. Penny also mentioned that the only person she knew from Dodge was Linda, who Penny thought was his roommate because she always saw Linda happy with her boyfriend. However, his plan to end his life failed. The next morning, Dodge woke up feeling perfectly fine, and even stranger, he found a stray dog tied to him along with an apology note. With only 12 days left, Dodge took the dog and started walking home. As he passed through the city, Dodge noticed that people were becoming more aggressive. Fights, fires, and looting were happening everywhere. At his apartment, Dodge fed the dog while watching the news, and he knew that riots were breaking out in various places. While waiting, Dodge started going through the old letters and was shocked when he found a letter from Olivia from a few months ago. Olivia wrote that she had never stopped thinking about Dodge and wanted to meet him. But at the end of the letter, Olivia said not to search for her again because it was too late. Her last sentence said that Dodge was the love of her life. Suddenly, a brick smashed through his apartment window, and the building alarm started going off. The sounds of the riots were getting closer, and people had started acting brutally in the hallways. Dodge quickly grabbed the dog, the harmonica, and the letters, then ran out through the fire escape. Dodge headed to Penny's apartment and met Owen, who thought Penny had been cheating on him, and ended up punching the wall so hard that he broke his hand. Dodge didn't care and just went to wake up Penny, but Owen wouldn't stop arguing with him. When Dodge mentioned the riots, Penny paused for a moment, then quickly grabbed a recording from her personal collection. The three of them finally ran out of the building, and Penny decided to drive, but she had forgotten where she parked the car. At that moment, some people started shooting, and Owen told Penny to be his human shield. When they finally found the car, Penny had trouble parking because she wasn't good at parallel parking. Owen got out of the car to help, but just kept insulting Penny while explaining why she broke up with him. Dodge, already a little annoyed, finally mentioned that he knew someone who had a plane, and if Penny drove him out of there, he would introduce her to that person. Penny, super excited, finally managed to get the car out and left Owen behind. Unfortunately, the next day they ran out of gas because Penny had forgotten to fill the tank all the way. They had to walk, and Penny tried to stay positive, which only made Dodge more desperate. Dodge said that his life was ruined because he couldn't get the letter from Olivia on time, and who knew where Olivia was now. Penny felt incredibly guilty and promised to help Dodge meet his lost love. As they kept walking, they met a man named Glenn who agreed to give them a ride. During the ride, Glenn started talking about his childhood, and Dodge couldn't stand listening to every word, especially when Glenn said his doctor told him he only had 6 weeks to live. After learning about the end of the world, Glenn considered ending his life, but then he realized that wouldn't take him to heaven. Dodge started getting really suspicious of Glenn, especially when he noticed digging equipment in the back of his truck. Eventually, Glenn stopped his truck and said he was going to take a pee, asking Dodge to come along. Dodge, growing more suspicious, refused, and once Glenn left, Dodge immediately told Penny that they might be traveling with a psychopath. Penny didn't take it too seriously and actually got out of the truck to take the dog for a walk, since it needed to pee too. Not long after, Glenn returned and suddenly said that Dodge needed to take off his mask, claiming that Dodge's blank face made him suspicious and thinking that Dodge might be a killer. Dodge clearly denied it, but Glenn apologized and explained that he had hired mercenaries to end it all. As Glenn laughed, he was suddenly shot, and Dodge saw the mercenaries leaving. Quickly, Dodge and Penny buried Glenn's body along with his gear and just left the truck behind. They continued their journey and eventually found a roadside restaurant called Frenzy's. They decided to stop for a bit to have coffee or just a drink. The server at the restaurant greeted them with a warm hug and let them know that all the staff had been smoking, so they were making all the crazy recipes. Penny and Dodge chose classic dishes, and they even fed the dog too. Penny even joined the conga line happening at the restaurant. As they ate, they started sharing stories about their lives. But suddenly, there was an unexpected surprise. Penny told the servers that it was Dodge's birthday, and they quickly brought out a small cake and sang happy birthday. Soon after, one of the servers kissed both of them, and what started as a relaxed meal turned even stranger. Feeling uncomfortable, they decided to take the dog and leave the restaurant. In the truck, the mood was a bit tense, and eventually they did something more personal. Dodge felt guilty because of the age difference, feeling like he was taking advantage of Penny, but Penny reminded him that she was an adult making her own choices. Suddenly, they heard sirens and saw police trying to stop them. Penny wanted to keep driving, thinking the law didn't matter anymore, but Dodge didn't want things to get worse and forced her to stop. Since he was smoking, Dodge quickly grabbed his cigarette and hid it in his mouth, but accidentally inhaled the smoke. The police arrived and started taking note of their belongings. At that point, Penny tried to explain, saying that it was all pointless, but the police didn't care and arrested them anyway. In prison, they met a man who had been arrested for disturbing the peace, claiming that the end of the world was near. Penny started feeling down because she felt like she had failed to keep her promise to Dodge, so Dodge hugged her through the prison bars and told her that he hadn't destroyed her life. In fact, he'd destroyed it a long time ago. When the mood started to improve, Dodge began telling her that he no longer had a family. His mother had died from illness, and his father had abandoned him. Dodge played the harmonica, and the two of them fell asleep in the silence. The next day, a new police officer arrived and immediately released them. Unfortunately, the officer couldn't return their truck because it had been impounded, but he offered them a ride. Penny remembered that her ex-boyfriend lived nearby, so the officer took them there. When they arrived, Dodge immediately felt jealous when he saw Speck, Penny's ex-boyfriend, who was a former military man with a big build and a private bomb shelter. It was clear that Speck still had feelings for Penny and gave her a satellite phone so she could call her family. Penny was finally able to contact her parents and hear the voices of her siblings and her newborn nephew. Just as Penny felt relieved, Speck told Dodge that only Penny could stay at his place, not Dodge. After that, Penny asked to borrow the car and refused to stay there. Speck agreed, but reminded Penny to return the car once she fulfilled her promise to Dodge. They continued on together and eventually reached Olivia's childhood home, but unfortunately, no one answered the door. Penny finally broke the window to open the door of the house they found, and as soon as they got inside, they knew it was the perfect place to spend the night. The fridge was full of food, so they agreed to stay there. While cooking, Dodge found a record player and he played some old songs. The atmosphere became warmer and more nostalgic. After a nap, Dodge woke up and sat down to have dinner with Penny and their dog. Penny started sharing more about her family, especially her dad, who gave her his favorite records. While checking a drawer, Penny found a letter from Olivia to her parents with the sender's address. Dodge, who overheard this, immediately became interested, and they decided to go there the next day. That night, Dodge saw Olivia's name written on his childhood bed, while Penny smiled looking at old photos of Dodge from his yearbook. The next day, they went to the address on the letter, and Dodge asked Penny to wait in the car. Dodge went to the house for a moment, only to return a few seconds later. Penny was confused, but Dodge simply said that he didn't knock on the door, just left a letter. A little argument occurred when Penny wondered what really happened, causing Dodge to almost hit a line of people. Then they both got out of the car and walked toward the beach, where people were gathering to be baptized. While enjoying the rather sweet scenery, they shared warmth and joined the people on the beach for a fun picnic. Their dog also played with the locals. Dodge tried to teach Penny how to play the harmonica, which turned out to be a gift from his father. After that fun day, they continued their journey and arrived at a house that afternoon, where they met Frank, Dodge's father. Penny gave them some privacy, while Frank tried to apologize to Dodge, but Dodge reassured him that everything was fine because the end was near. Even so, Frank still tried to be kind, and the three of them spent time together, even playing harmonica together. Once Penny fell asleep, Dodge carried her to the plane and gently told her that she was his true love before Frank flew to England. After that, Dodge returned to his apartment with their dog. When he arrived, he found a note from Karen and Elsa, who had been cleaning his apartment, and Dodge got angry, telling Elsa to spend time with her family. Elsa felt hurt, thinking of Dodge as a friend, and Dodge felt regretful. Elsa then told him to come back next week, though she knew it would never happen again. Sometime later, Dodge was watching the last TV broadcast, where the news anchor announced that their calculations were wrong and the asteroid would arrive in 16 hours. The anchor also gave a very touching farewell speech, and then the TV signal finally cut off. With a heavy heart, Dodge went to Penny's apartment and started listening to their old recordings, reminiscing about all the beautiful memories they had made. Dodge lay on the floor, waiting for the end, listening to the music until the power went out. Suddenly, their dog started barking, and Dodge was shocked to see Penny back. It turned out that Penny had woken up during the flight and asked Frank to bring her back. After hugging, they lay in bed together, acknowledging their feelings for each other. To keep Penny calm and distracted from the impending explosion, Dodge kept talking to her and asking about her life. They looked into each other's eyes when the asteroid finally hit Earth, bringing everything to an end.